and welcome to the UKSIF Leadership Podcast. It's Sally here, and for today's episode, I'm delighted to say that we have another episode from our spring conference. Really was an excellent event. We wanted to share another session with you. This one was a chat between Oscar and Katherine Annand, Climate Lead Retail Banking at NatWest. They're going to be talking about green mortgages. Hope you enjoy it.
First of all, Katherine, thanks so much for taking the time to join us on day 2 of our conference to discuss this topic. Maybe to begin our conversation, it'd be really great to get your thoughts, Katherine, on what's the role that you see for green mortgages today, decarbonising the UK's homes, and how lenders like NatWest Group are responding to consumer demand for these types of products.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me here today. It's great to speak to all of you. It's my first time at this conference, and I live in Edinburgh, so it's fantastic to be here in my hometown. So brilliant to be here, and yes, sort of changing the conversation a little bit from the last speakers. So I guess it's worth pointing out at the beginning that for us at NatWest, green mortgages are a hugely important part of our transition planning. Property in the UK, it's becoming increasingly known how much that contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. So we know that around 20% of greenhouse gas emissions in the UK come from residential homes. So as a bank, it's a huge area of exposure for us from a financed emissions perspective. It forms a huge part of our transition planning disclosures around property systems as well. It's also a huge area for us from a risk perspective as well in relation to property. So it's really important for us that we monitor, the EPC distribution of our mortgage book, for example, and that we are working towards improving that. So I think green mortgages are probably a key first step in financing the transition to greener homes. We know that without finance, we're not going to be able to solve the issue of decarbonising the UK housing stock. So we really need to unlock the financial the finance for consumers. We know from customer feedback that the incentive of climate change itself isn't always enough for the vast majority of customers. We know that many customers do care about climate change, but when it comes down to the bottom line, that's not the only issue they care about. They have other things on their minds at the moment. Of course, they've got the cost of living crisis, they've got energy bills. So customers need that added push or financial incentive to take green action. So that's where banks need to come in, that's where investors need to come in and support customers in making this change. So green mortgages are a good initiator in this space. At NatWest, we launched our green mortgage in October 2020. And this is offering a discount for purchasing an energy efficient home. So it's an incentive product, it's a reward for customers, a reward for purchasing a home that's already green. So I guess when you look at it, does this product actually turn the dial in terms of moving towards that transition? Possibly not, because would you buy a more energy efficient home only because you got a slightly reduced interest rate? The answer is you probably wouldn't. So we probably need something that really turns the dial a bit more and moves us more in the direction other than only green mortgages. I think the product of green mortgages itself, helps to get it more on people's radar, but doesn't necessarily tip the dial. So I think we need more financial incentives in this space. We need more diverse financial incentives. So we really need banks to be looking at what they can do around diversifying their green offerings. So looking at things like green additional borrowing, so lending for the purposes of retrofitting, green unsecured lending, and maybe looking at even more complex finance solutions like property-linked finance, which I know the GFI are looking at the moment. So I think whilst green mortgages is kind of dipping the toe in the water, it's not necessarily turning the dial. And we're also seeing some great incentives for banks to operate more in this space. So you've got the Green Home Finance Accelerator Programme, which just came out towards the end of last year, and which was introduced by the government, which NatWest are participating in. So it's good to see the kind of the drive towards green finance. But I think, as I said, I think green mortgages are just kind of the beginning of the journey. And in terms of customer appetite for green mortgages, I think Customer uptake on these is usually quite considerable, given that it's usually, well, for us particularly, it's the mortgage that they're recommended due to the price point. So at NatWest, if you have a property that's EPC rated A or B, you will be offered a green mortgage product because you'll be eligible for that product, which will be a discount. So customers tend to respond to that financial incentive quite well. It's made easy for them, but they won't necessarily do it if it's too much hassle for them as well. So we need to bear that in mind for customers. But I think what we really need to test is whether customers are willing to take on a significant amount of finance to retrofit their homes. Retrofits can be hugely costly for customers. We're running a pilot at the moment where we're seeing retrofits cost up to £40,000 for customers to fully retrofit their homes. Most people can't afford that. So we're also looking to understand what customers what customers are willing to do to finance this for themselves as well. So whilst we've kind of taken that first step in the green mortgage space, and we know many other banks have, we think it's about looking to diversify, looking at what other green products we can bring to the market to support that transition to greener housing, and understanding customer incentives and how willing they are to take out that finance as well.
And I guess from the customers, from your experience, the customers that you're dealing with, I mean, do you think you are seeing this increasing appetite for those sorts of products? And I guess my question more is like, how do you tackle that perception that kind of, it's going to cost so much money that actually it's not a good kind of long-term investment for my property in the long run? I guess, how do we address that with that, I guess, cultural sort of dynamic there?
I think it's definitely a huge problem, because people see the upfront costs of things like a heat pump, for example, which is, around £10,000 on average. And most people just aren't in the position to be able to afford that straight away. So we need to look at how we can educate customers on the long-term repayment of these retrofit options, and also look at other options, things like heat pump as a service. That's something that we're seeing coming out on the market now. Could you install a heat pump on your home and have the reduction in your energy bills, and that's how you repay the heat pump over time. So looking at how we can, explore different options for customers repaying that amount, teaching them, educating customers and raising their awareness around the repayment of that, and how their energy bills will reduce as a result of that, because I think energy bills is one of the key drivers for customers in this space as well. So it's really hard to incentivize customers to take that first leap and spend that large amount of money on their property when they're not going to see an instant repayment. And potentially looking also at cash incentives, cashback incentives, that sort of thing for customers, whether you pair up with somebody like a retailer to offer them free insulation or something like that, just to get them on the journey. But it's definitely a problem that we recognize within NatWest.
Yeah, it's really helpful. And we talked about some of the challenges and market barriers, I suppose, so far. But one thing that you and I talked about before was, I guess, how do we kind of make sure that the kind of skills and the supply chains are kind of fit for purpose, and you've got actually the people to carry out all these upgrades and improvements to properties for those who might want to. Yeah, definitely. So one of the projects that we're running at NatWest at the moment is called the Greener Homes Retrofit Project, where we're taking 9 customers through an end-to-end fully funded retrofit with British Gas and Worcester Bosch. So we're working together in a coalition to deliver these retrofits, to learn about the barriers that exist for customers. So because it's fully funded for customers, we're not testing the actual financial element for customers, but what we are learning about is some of the market barriers, some of the supply chain barriers, and the green skills barriers as well that exist in the market. So I think it's one of the key things that we have seen throughout this process is supply chain is needing a huge amount of investment in it. We have seen huge delays in equipment and technology for a number of the retrofits, particularly in relation to solar panels for customers. We're also seeing a huge lack of tradespeople that are qualified to carry out retrofit on customer homes. So we've seen big delays. For example, for some customers, we had quotes given to them last August, and they're only now getting the install starting to take place on certain types of retrofits. So that's been, 9 months wait for some things. So you can see there's a huge number of barriers here. And also we see with, in terms of green skills, the people that are skilled, they're so few and far between that they choose jobs that are kind of aggregated jobs with housing associations where they can fit, 10, 15 jobs in one go. They're less likely to want to take on the kind of individual retrofit jobs. So we're seeing those are the kind of key barriers that we've seen throughout the project around supply chain and green skills. And even where you have the motivation from a customer
who wants to do this work, or they have the funds to do the work, or you've got 3 corporations coming together trying to make this happen, we're still seeing these huge amounts of delays, and it's nearly taken us a year to complete an entire retrofit for these customers. So it's been really interesting to see that play out. Yeah,
sounds quite frustrating. If it's okay with you, Katherine, we might turn to some questions from members of the audience. So thanks everyone for sending these through. We got a question from Callum Richardson. Callum's question is, are the mortgages based only on EPC ratings? There are a lot of known issues with the measurement mechanism of the EPC scheme. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yes, so it's a really good question. So at the moment, for us, the data point that we use for verifying our green mortgages is EPC data. We know that it's a flawed tool. It's another thing that has come up through our pilot is how flawed the EPC is as a tool. So we know, for example, that the EPC won't recommend a heat pump as a improvement measure. It also doesn't identify defects in cavity wall insulation in a property. So it will tick, the property has cavity wall insulation, yes or no. But what we've gone in with thermal imaging to find is that a lot of the cavity wall insulation is only, up to here in the wall. So that property's EPC score is not reflective of the actual energy efficiency of the home. We know there are issues with the tool, and it's something that we are actively engaged in lobbying the government on as well within NatWest. At the moment, it's the only tool we have for measuring the energy efficiency of the home. It's the only official tool that we have. One thing we are looking at within the bank is looking at other ways we can complement EPC data, whether that's using smart meter data, whether it's using thermal imaging to complement the existing data that we have on EPC to ensure that we are measuring more effectively the energy efficiency of our portfolio. But we know for now that it is a persistent issue, is the EPC tool itself.
Do you think that this is something that policymakers in the UK would actually look at? And I guess, sort of more broadly, what more do you think kind of policymakers here could be doing? I think we had a lot of discussion on things they should be doing yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. So I think as far as I know, policymakers are looking at the EPC tool, and we have been engaged in discussions around this already. So I think it is something that's very much on the radar. A lot of players across the industry have been raising the issue around the EPC. So I think it is something that is being looked at the moment. I think in terms of other areas that we need investment or focus from the government, I think sort of some of the key things that we've seen through our project are kind of logistics around retrofitting. So putting aside all the kind of the personal issues that customers might encounter around cost and personal disruption to their home, we've seen things like the infrastructure not actually existing already for certain technology, for taking the example of heat pumps. We had one customer who was getting a heat pump installed. They had to upgrade the fuse to their home, but because the cable outside their home was not the right size, we had to dig up the road outside that customer's home. That's for one person to get a heat pump, and that involved getting planning permission. It took weeks to get that through. So I think investment in the infrastructure, I feel as if the UK is not in a position where it is ready for a heat pump revolution at the moment. So I think ensuring that there's investment in, as I said, investment in the infrastructure there, and ensuring that there are sufficient grants and financial incentives available to customers as well. Something that we're seeing is, we're trying to offer financial support to customers looking to retrofit their homes. We're looking to raise awareness of this, but it's actually really difficult to understand what grants are available in this space. It's quite complex. There's no sort of one-stop shop that outlines what grants are available. So I think improving on that and improving on access to finance for this is another area that needs a lot of focus.
Yeah, that sounds terribly familiar, your comments on the kind of lack of joined-up thinking and strategies and policies.
Yes, yeah.
It always comes up in conversations that we have, and I think we talked a lot in the Real Economy panel yesterday about the incentives that you get from the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, where it's all kind of, clear plans, all kind of joined-up thinking, joined-up policies, and, of something that we'll be pushing for at UKSIF from this government.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
I might turn to a few more questions from folks in the audience. So we've got an anonymous question that's come in, which asks, at what point would NatWest consider lending on an EPC G-rated property too risky?
That's another really good question. So something we're focusing on at the moment around climate risk is what are our limits in terms of lending to certain EPCs. So at the moment, we won't lend to an EPC E or below if it's a buy-to-let property. Those are the only limits that we have in place in respect of EPCs at the moment. However, it is certainly something that's on our radar. We think actually limiting lending to certain segments of the market could be potentially problematic in terms of the fact many customers actually can't afford to retrofit their homes, and you might be disadvantaging customers in certain financial situations. So we also think that potentially limiting lending in that way, you're kind of possibly passing the problem on to somebody else. Rather than actually addressing the problem and actually financing the transition, you're just refusing to lend on that property. That customer might then be able to go and get lending somewhere else. You're not actually addressing the issue with that customer's home. So I think our strategy is probably more centered around actually supporting those customers in making their homes greener. What does that customer need? How can we design flexible finance solutions and journeys that can support customers on that journey? And also target customers at key points in the mortgage life cycle where we know they've got an EPCG rated property, and really help them with that transition. But it's a really good question and something that we have had quite a number of discussions about internally at NatWest.
That's really helpful. Yeah, the questions are flying in, so I will ask a few more if that's okay with you.
Yeah, definitely. Go for it.
So yeah, thanks again for all the questions. There's loads and loads coming in. Another anonymous question is, the key thing is educating consumers on the pros of retrofits, particularly with the cost of living crisis. What is being done in this field by banks generally?
Yeah, so I think on the whole, banks are definitely becoming wiser to the need to engage consumers on this. As I mentioned at the start, residential mortgages are a huge area of risk for banks, so they know that this is something they've got to be doing, and especially with the widespread of customer base, the market share that we have across the UK, it's really important that banks are engaging in this and educating customers. We've seen a lot more in the way of green home improvement offerings from banks over the last year or so. We've seen a huge uptake in this, cashback incentives for customers installing different retrofit measures, new green mortgage products coming out. So it's great to see the engagement from banks across the sector on this. But I think, speaking personally from a NatWest lens, customer awareness is absolutely key for us. So we've created something called a Climate Change Hub within our personal banking public-facing web pages. And this is an educational resource which we're kind of ploughing the sort of pocket and planet message. We know that it's really the cost of things that are the true motivator for customers in this space. It's not going to be planet first. And if you want to link it to banking, you have to show them how it's going to financially benefit them making these changes. So we've got a customer climate change hub, which shows customers small changes they can make in their daily lifestyle, whether it's to their home, whether it's in their daily spending, whether it's things like reducing spend on things like fast fashion, changes that they can make in this space that will save them money but also help the planet at the same time. So we've got our customer climate change hub. We've also got a dedicated home energy hub, which links customers up to a lot of resources on retrofitting, links out to different partners that we work with, and really aims to educate customers on changes they can make within their home and how they can go about doing that. And we also have a kind of a customer communication strategy around this. So we do kind of targeted prompts and targeted email communications to customers, making sure that we're kind of targeting customers that we think are, EPC, potentially, certain EPC rating, and they're potentially likely to make these changes. So communication, awareness, and education is really key for us at NatWest, and we've definitely seen a huge increase on the whole across banks in this area.
That's super helpful. Education piece is super important, just giving those little prompts and nudges to all of us who are so busy in terms of what we're doing day to day. We've got a question that touches a little bit on kind of what's going on here in Scotland. So a question from Jamie Govan, who says, there are lots of listed buildings in Scotland and the UK which have restrictions on energy efficiency potential. How might banks incentivize buyers of these properties? I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
Yeah, that's another really good question. So I think one of the key issues that we see around retrofitting is how old and diverse the UK's housing stock is. So there's absolutely no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to retrofitting. Unfortunately, when it comes to certain listed buildings, there's certain work that you can't do on a property. But I think it's just, I think about recognizing the diversity of the housing stock, the age of the housing stock, and bringing in, diverse solutions that are going to support that as well. We haven't actually, through our pilot, we haven't actually dealt with any listed buildings at the moment, but we do have a number of older properties that we've had to work with. So, recognizing that there's a number of restrictions that are probably going to be quite difficult to get around. There might also just be some properties in the UK that we can't retrofit as well, accepting that we might not be able to retrofit every single home in the UK, and do what we can with what we're in control of as well.
I might take one final question from the audience. The question is, do you take into consideration if the green mortgage is used for renting or owning? And then they had a comment saying upcoming EPC legislation is very much focused on rented space.
Yeah, definitely. So our green mortgage is available for kind of buy-to-let and organic mortgages as well. So we recognise that buy-to-let, the regulations are coming in faster for landlords. So that's definitely a focus. But I think renters in this space, it's a bit more of we definitely recognise that it's more of a challenge. So one of the things that we've learned is engaging renters on the retrofit and green agenda in relation to greener homes is more difficult because they, of course, they don't own the property, so they're less invested in it. But I think particularly the rental space, we know from a landlord perspective, is a huge area of focus coming down the line from a regulatory standpoint. So we're looking at ways we can specifically target landlords, and our mortgage is currently available for them at the moment, and we are working with a number of our partners on how we can offer a kind of targeted solution for the buy-to-let market as well. So it's definitely something that is a key focus for us.
That's good to hear. I think we've now run out of time, if not a bit over time, but that's all right. Any sort of final messages for the audience here? Obviously, give you the last word. Yeah,
thank you so much. So just thank you so much for having me. It's been great to talk about this today. And I think, key messages are obviously collectively, we've got a huge customer base across the whole of the UK in many different areas, obviously not only in relation to consumers. So I think the power that we hold collectively in terms of educating and awareness in this space is absolutely huge. So I would just encourage everybody to take that message back. And also on the investments piece, I think investment in the infrastructure, in the supply chain and in green skills is where we're seeing the greatest need here at the moment as well. So I think that would be the key message.
Great. Thanks so much, Katherine, and particularly thanks so much for taking all the questions that have been thrown at you from members of the audience. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us. And I think that brings us to a close. I think we've got tea and coffee coming up now. So thanks very much again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. We'll be back in just a few weeks with another episode of the UKSIF Leadership Podcast. So keep an eye out on our Twitter at UKSIF, spelt UKSIF, for updates. In the meantime, please follow us, rate us on whichever platform you're using. Let us know how you find the podcast, and we'll see you next time.